The RSAC Scottish and Voyonic Grampian Forest rallies were strongly supported throughout the various classes. In this review, we catch up with those competitors we haven't seen yet. Thomas Milne and Neil Jeffrey were making their first SRC start of the year in their MG3. Some pre-event testing with Chris Ingram gave the young charger some extra confidence, and they had an excellent run despite flirting with the edges of the road on occasion. On the way to 38th overall and the C1 win. Scott Gourley had a new navigator in Connor Gardner for this round, and it was a tough day at the office for the 205 crew, the dipstick snapping in stage 1, causing a cockpit full of smoke. Things didn't really improve in the afternoon, spinning in stage 4 and puncturing a tyre in 5. 52nd overall at the finish was their reward for persevering. Campbell and Donald McComb were making their first SRC start of the year. Sadly, they retired in stage 5 while enjoying one of their best runs so far. Lewis Haining and Johan Anderson were out in an 1800-engined MG3 for this round. Unfortunately, gearbox issues from SS1 onwards slowed their attack, eventually finishing 51st, although they did manage 26th quickest over the final stage. Alan McDowell and Ian McDougall were fastest in class on the first 3 stages, establishing an early lead. But it would all go wrong with a 2-minute time penalty for booking in early and dropping them to a frustrated second in class, 6 seconds off the top spot.
It's going well.
Absolutely delighted to be back in the woods, Alistair Brearley and Richard Wardle's day was very smooth. The only blemish on the Mark II crew's run was a slight intercom issue in stage 4, but the rest of the day was very good, keeping things clean in the slippy conditions and capitalising on the time penalty for McDowell and McDougall to take the Class C3 win by just 6 seconds. Graham Sherry and Ewan Leesy's day ended early with a hold radiator. Stuart and Alice Patterson's day began with a bang, and off in stage 1 doing a lot of panel damage and rearranging the suspension. They soldiered on for the first loop and managed to make it to service, allowing the crew to change various suspension components and keep them in the event. The second loop was equally challenging, another off in stage 6, still not defeating them, dragging the car to the finish in 53rd overall. David McLeod and Eamon Boyle were debuting their new Avenger on gravel on this round. David and Eamon learning a lot about how the car drove on the loose compared to the Sunbeam, and were getting closer to the top H1 times as the day wore on, finishing 44th overall. Another crew delighted to be back in the woods, Robin Shuttleworth and Malcolm Smithson were flying once again in their Mark I Escort. Despite finding the stages to be a little bit loose, they spent the day enjoying an entertaining battle with the unregistered Menzies family in their Pinto-engined Mark II. Pushing the 1600 as hard as they could, Robin and Malcolm lost out in the contest by just 12 seconds, but had the consolation of yet another H1 win and 31st overall. Ernie Lee was finding the Scottish roads to be quite narrow for the big BMW, co-driver Patricia expressing some concerns about how frequently they were flirting with some of the ditches. 42nd overall and 3rd in class was another solid result. Donald Peacock and Mary Riddick's morning was very eventful, enjoying an intermittent misfire, a puncture and a couple of visits to the scenery. Some work in service helped with the misfire and they put on a late charge, grabbing 2nd in class, just 19 seconds away from the win. Christopher Smith was joined in his Corsa by former Scottish tarmac champion Andrew Blackwood for this round. Still learning the forestry game, it was a very consistent day for Christopher and Andrew, grabbing 2nd in class and 43rd overall, despite finding some of the repeat stages to be hard on the car. And really earning their finish this time out, Nilecown Junior and Charlie Sayer Payne's whole event was in doubt after the MG's engine blew on the Tuesday leading up to the event. An incredible effort, swapping a new engine into the car in just under a day and making it to the start line was an achievement within itself. The actual day was very good, powering the car to 28th overall and second front-wheel drive car home, repaying everybody that chipped in to get them to the start. We lost both David Hardy and John McCullough's Mark II and Brian Gourley and Craig McKean's BMW on the opening loop. On board with Scott Peacock and Craig Wallace in stage 1, and you can see how Craig Rutherford and Ashley Will's day ended.
C50, long left 5 in.
Gordon Morrison and Ian Parker would slide off the road in stage 4.
Even in the road section. And this is how it should sound.
Yeah.
What a speed of a gear change there, did you hear that? Shines.
And stage 4 would also claim Walter Henderson and Jim Kinloch, the clutch failing on the start line. Mike Moats and Gary McDonald endured a difficult day in their Impreza, battling a misfire from SS2 onwards. When the car was working right, they were right on the pace, third fastest in class in the final stage, on the way to 41st overall. Also enduring a difficult day, Simon Hay and Callum Jaffrey were struggling to get along with these roads. Despite not particularly enjoying their day, they still managed 29th overall. Also not overly happy with their day in these forests, Ian Baumgart and Richard Simmons were another crew not clicking with the Scottish roads. The Impreza finishing 21st overall, despite the bad day.
Subaru, he pedals it.
I wouldn't mind £1 for a mile that car's done.
Oof.
Aileen Forrest and Tom Hind were running well in the morning in their Evo, lying 31st after the morning loop. The afternoon was less successful, 2 late punctures dropping them to 35th by the finish. Richard Stewart and Karen Tate Logan confessed to being rather freaked out by how slippy the opening stage of the day was. SS2 and 3 were much more to Richard's liking, really enjoying his home forests. The second half of the day was very solid, the 208 grabbed 40th overall. Having missed a couple of events due to family commitments, Bob Adamson and Liam Whiteley were keen to get back in the saddle. Bob continuing his love-hate relationships with these roads, seeing he loves Kinharvey but doesn't get on with Dalbeattie. 17th at the finish was a good return to action for the Fiesta crew. Thomas Milne and Neil Jeffrey were competing on the Grampian as part of Thomas's SRC prize drive. Leading the class overnight, they unfortunately slipped off the road in SS4. No damage was done and they were able to carry on once recovered, gaining valuable miles and experience.
That boy is, well, he put it off during the shakedown. We'll know you talk about that. He dinged a wing on the door.
Returning to the SRC for the first time since his off on the 2023 Galloway Hills, Mark Gordon would take the C1 win in his 205. With Ian McLeod jumping into the hot seat at the last minute, they were under very strict instructions from the team to make sure they saw the finish. A controlled drive to 57th overall was exactly what they needed. John Brownie and Gordon Ritchie were back in their trusty Opel Kadett in their home forests, and it was a solid run, John enjoying his local stages, despite doing a little bit of rear-end damage on a heavy landing. They ended up in 55th overall, just one place down on Alistair Brearley and Richard Wardle. Alistair admitted to being a little distracted when the car developed a coolant leak while queuing for scrutineering. They got that sorted, but he was unimpressed with his Friday night performance. Saturday was better, the escort crew trying to balance speed with conserving the car, on the way to second in class and 54th overall. Back out for the first time since the Speyside, Robert Tong had a new navigator in Graham Harris and was another driver just looking for a solid run and a good finish. Knocking the rust off on the Friday night, the Saturday was going well, although they briefly visited a ditch on Saturday morning. No damage done, the MG finished in 51st overall. Cameron Black and Duncan Don's 323 had been treated to some more upgrades since they debuted their new engine at the Speyside. They were running strongly until a turbo water pipe burst in the road section between stages 5 and 6. They performed roadside repairs, but decided not to carry on when the car lapsed onto 3 cylinders. "56th overall at the finish, Neil and Ian Phillip were very happy to carry on their trusty Impreza's impressive finishing record. Neil saying it was warm work inside the car, but was enjoying the stages, finding the slippy sections to be particularly good fun. Mike Grant and Graham Kelman were another crew back out for the first time since the Speyside. Their Subaru had been treated to a lot of development work over the break, and Mike was hopeful of a big improvement in performance. And that was definitely the case. 44th overall and a class win. It was a rough event for the H1 competitors, Keith Robertson and Andrew Brown not even making it out of SS1 due to engine problems. David McLeod and Eamon Boyle also didn't see the finish, retiring with damaged suspension on the Avenger in stage 5 while battling for the class lead.
I think that was one of Angus Laurie's cars that he prepared.
All right.
Actually seeing the finish, Robin Shuttleworth and Malcolm Smithson weren't overly happy with their performance on the Friday, but were enjoying swapping times with McLeod and Boyle. When the Avenger sadly retired, Robin and Malcolm were left as the sole H1 crew and ran well to grab 48th overall, just 0.5 of a second down on Megan and John O'Kane's R2 Fiesta. Megan and John endured another difficult event in their Fiesta. A big moment on the same corner that claimed Finlay Retson and Paul Beaton on the Friday was only survived when a big rock bounced them back onto the road. That bent things in the suspension, and a couple of further knocks on the Saturday made the car even more tricky to drive. To cap things off, there was a return of the gear selection problems that had plagued their Speyside, Megan suspecting an issue with the diff. Graham Morrison and Martin Forrest were forced out with low oil pressure at the end of SS1.
I don't think that's right.
Having competed on some events down south since they made their Speyside debut, Michael Phillip and Laura Dawson were clearly feeling more comfortable with their Mark II. They enjoyed a fast and entertaining run to 41st overall and 4th in class.
Oh.
See, that would be a done.
Mike Moats and Gary McDonald started well on the Friday night in their Impreza, lying 50th overnight. SS4 saw them burst a brake pipe, disappearing up a fire break when they discovered they had no way of stopping. That was sorted in service, and they still managed 46th overall. Ian Baumgart and Richard Simmons were having a better day out than they had endured at the Scottish. Another crew with car conservation at the forefront of their minds, they took 31st overall and 3rd in class at the finish.
Scottish Championship boys were doing.
John Crawford and Josh Davidson survived a big overshoot on the Friday night, John blaming not knowing how the brake bias adjuster worked on the Fiesta. They continued to learn about their new car, but slipped off the road in stage 6. It was another difficult event for Chris Colley and Ricky Finlayson, an electrical glitch cutting the engine in stage 2, costing 30 seconds. The Saturday morning started well with a 3rd fastest time in the opening loop, but it went back downhill quickly, 2 punctures dropping them from 18th overall after stage 5 to 34th at the finish.